So, to start working on this premiere, Phenomenal of the Earth, you took a trip to the forest.
Yeah, so I went and stayed at the Bernheim forest for a few days, sort of at the beginning of the process, but I had already decided that I wanted um, to to create some sort of piece that was inspired by like nature and earth themes. And I really liked juxtaposing that with synthesizer because I don't think people would normally think to pair those things, but I found like an interesting connection between synthesizer and nature. So I had already like played a lot with my synthesizer and had like sort of gathered a bunch of sounds, but I didn't really know how I was going to piece it all together. So I was able to go and stay at the Bernheim Forest for a few days, which uh, just allowed me to like take hikes in the morning and then like come back and then just like write a lot and then go outside for a bit more and then come back and just write, which was really incredible. It was very dreamy. It was also very isolating, which in some ways was really nice to like shut out sort of the city and people and just sort of like different influences. Um, and I think that like sort of gave room for the piece to be a bit weird or something. Um, but I don't know. I had so much fun just like coming up with like the strangest sounds that I could and thinking about like what that experience would be like live and with like, like 40 other people playing. Um, yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of just going on a rant, but it was really wonderful and really interesting. I've never been able to uh, have a retreat to write before, so it was great.
There is kind of a long history of composers, having their cabin or having and writers too, having their place in the woods where they go to work. Did you consider that while you were out there that, you were following that sort of tradition?
A little bit, or like you know, in hearing about other artists sort of doing a similar thing, that's always resonated with me. Like, oh, I would love to just like be around nature for like a bit, just to work. Um, so it's like always sort of resonated with me, and I was a bit aware of it while I was doing it. Yeah, yeah.
You said it was overall pretty magical. What specifically did you find yourself getting gripped by while you were out there?
I think a big part of it was that one of Bernheim's missions is to connect people and artists and nature, and they have these really beautiful sculptures by all different artists throughout the grounds. Um, and I think it was also inspiring to see how other artists were connecting with nature and using nature like as a literal source. Like the materials that they used came from, like trees, like recycled trees from like that forest, or other materials from the forest, and being able to just like take a walk around like lots of trees, and then see art that people made in response to that, and like being inspired by that. I think I've always been inspired by other artists in particular. Um, and even though I wasn't around anybody else, I got to see the work that people were doing. Yeah, that was a big part of it.
You're often inspired by visual art. Um, how was this different? Was it different in that you didn't have like a specific painting or a specific image and you were able to sort of look around and say,
Yeah, this is interesting because it feels like my most um, visual piece in a way. It wasn't inspired by anything in particular, but I did turn to just the sort of tactile world. Um, so the piece is like a set of miniatures, and each miniature sort of like drops you into a different sound world. And the first one, Sunbloom, I remember just like cruising through YouTube one day, and I came across a time lapse of a sunflower growing, and that became like the main inspiration for the very first part of the piece. And then being able to like uh, um, stay at Bernheim and like feel the pace of the environment around me, and how different that is than like watching a time lapse of a sunflower, but like sort of finding connections and pacing. I don't know. Again, I'm just like going on a bit of a rant, but it's a very visual piece. It's very much inspired by uh, the way that things look and move, and the way that things are paced, and yeah, yeah.
I think it would be easy for someone to say the synthesizer is the opposite of nature when it comes to musical sound, but you also do get to use sound in its kind of most elemental way with a
Mm.
synthesizer. What is it like to compose for this instrument that can pretty much do anything?
Yeah, I mean, I've turned to electronics. I've been really intrigued by electronic music the last few years, because you can truly make any sound. If you can think of it, you can like get so much closer to it. But with synthesizer, I have this synthesizer in particular. It's a fully analog synthesizer, which means that there's like electrical components in it that are like actually making the sound in real time. So it when playing it, it really does feel like you're playing like a live thing, which I thought was really important for writing this piece. But I didn't want it to be an exclusive thing where like people can only play this piece on this particular synthesizer. So it's like pretty open to what people can do with it. Um, but it felt important to have it be a live thing rather than like a pre-recorded track, or like just like a beat going on in the background or whatever. um I think especially in like, well, live music is very special. Like having that feeling of performers playing live in front of you um is very special, and also like I feel like directly ties into this theme of nature and things sort of happening in real time, and like you get little like artifacts in the synth that like you might not get with just like recording. Yeah.
Specifically, you said it's an analog synth. I'm sure there are some gearheads who want to know the specifics of
Yeah.
your synth.
Yes, yes, I would want to know. So this is Prophet 6 by Sequential. It's a pretty popular synth right now. It's a very, very nice synth. um, yeah, yeah.
How did you choose it?
I lived in Chicago before living in Louisville, and I went to the Chicago Music Exchange, which is a just a general music store. They have a lot of instruments and whatever. Um, and I went there a couple times to just like play on all of their synthesizers. Um, and before I even, because I had found out I just got this job, and like one of my first thoughts was like, I want to write a synthesizer concerto. I don't know if they're gonna let me, but I think I'm just gonna go and buy a synth and like try and make it happen. So I was looking for an instrument for this piece specifically. And before I even went to this music store to just try out different instruments, I heard somebody play this particular instrument at a concert, and like I was just blown away by the sound. Like it was just so rich and so beautiful, and I was like, oh my gosh, I've never heard a synthesizer sound like that. So
You said you didn't know if the orchestra would let you. What was the experience with the orchestra as the three of you in the Creators Corps went to the orchestra and said, okay, picture this? Were they
yeah,
up for anything?
yeah, actually, which has not happened um, with my experience with orchestras all the time in the past. They tend to be like pretty um, uh, conservative institutions. Um, and I think there have been times where I've asked to use electronics in some way, and there's usually a lot of pushback. So I wasn't sure if like me being a soloist and playing like an electronic instrument would fly with them. But it was really, I mean, I remember like writing this like long paragraph about like pitching the piece to them and why I believed in it and why I wanted to make these decisions. And their response was just, sounds great, do it. This is really, they seemed excited about the idea. So the orchestra was really supportive of this idea, which was great. Yeah.
So you're also playing the role of soloist here. What is your experience with being a concerto soloist? Is this something you've done before?
No, I've never soloed with an orchestra. I've never played with a professional orchestra. My only experience with orchestra was in middle and high school. I played cello at my public school, but I've never so in any way. So this
So
is new.
how's it been?
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, I got to write the part for myself, so that made it quite a bit easier. I mean, the orchestra's been super supportive. The musicians have been super supportive. Um, I'm definitely still getting comfortable with following a conductor that's still, new. But so far pretty smooth. We just had our first rehearsal yesterday. It went pretty well. There's like still some things that I'm getting used to, but it's been exciting.
In this process with the Louisville Orchestra, I know this is a somewhat fast turnaround for a piece of music. For most of you, it's not your fastest ever, but it's pretty close. How much time do you get to sort of go back in and make some edits and make some changes and fuss with what you've given to the orchestra?
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad you asked this question, because even after the first rehearsal, there's so many more edits that I would like to make in this piece than I might typically want to make, just because of our time constraint. And also it's a big piece. I've never written a 20-minute piece for orchestra, and there's a soloist. So we actually did, we got to do a reading of this piece, a draft of this piece back in early January. So a couple months ago, we did a reading. And the piece was not finished, but like was like mostly there. But I had a week and a half to edit things before needing to finish it, which was not enough time for me. I mean, I think I wrote this piece in about 4 months, and like for something like this, I would prefer to have like a year to work on it. So that's sort of the time constraints that we're working with. But I do think it is an interesting and maybe important thing to present works in progress, especially in public spaces, and like be open about that, because there's this sort of like perfectionism that's expected of classical musicians and composers, and the thing that you present is the final thing, but it doesn't have to be that.
This program is unique. I don't know
Yeah.
of another orchestra doing anything like it. If an orchestra was hesitant to do something like this to support composers, what would you say to convince them that, yes, you should do this?
One big reason is that all three of us have been able to engage creatively with Louisville as a community. All three of us in vastly different ways, which has, I don't know, I think that's a really important part of making music is finding community, growing community, connecting with community. And by being able to live here full time and be supported and have resources and connections like already sort of set up, like that allows us to, I don't know, like I know like my local bartenders now, and like I think some of them are going to come to the concert. Like that's not something that composers typically have when going to do like a premiere. We're usually like in a city for a couple days. We don't really get to know our surroundings. So I think that's a really special thing. Also, you know, composition is it's not the most it's not a safe career path. Um, it's not stable. And I mean, for me, even just having a year of like financial security has given me so much space to create things that I don't think I would have had like the brain space to create otherwise, because I might have been worrying about like, well, I have to take these other gigs that I can pay rent or, you know, things like that. So